What if a single name could strike fear into an entire city? In the mid-1980s, Southern California was gripped by terror as an unknown predator prowled the night. With each shadowy step, the sense of safety eroded, and the community was left wondering if killer would strike their own doorstep. This is the story of a serial killer that became all too real. Richard Ramirez, infamously known as the Night Stalker, was one of America's most terrifying serial killers, whose brutal crime spree from 1984 to 1985 left Southern California gripped with fear. His reign of terror included home invasions, murder, sexual assault, and robbery, marked by a chilling randomness and a blend of satanic symbolism that made his crimes uniquely disturbing. Born Ricardo Leyva Muñez Ramirez on February 29, 1960, in El Paso, Texas, Ramirez was the youngest of 5 children in a Mexican-American family. His early years were plagued by poverty, instability, and violence. His father, Julian Ramirez, was a former Juarez, Mexico police officer who struggled with anger management, leading to frequent outbursts and physical abuse. Seeking refuge, Richard would often sleep in a local cemetery, a dark foreshadowing of his later obsession with death. Ramirez's exposure to violence was exacerbated by his cousin Mike Ramirez, a decorated Vietnam War veteran. Miguel not only shared horrifying stories of his actions in Vietnam, but also showed Richard graphic photographs of his brutal exploits, including images of raped and dismembered women. These tales and visuals profoundly influenced the young Ramirez, desensitizing him to violence and further distorting his sense of morality. When Ramirez was 13, he witnessed Miguel fatally shoot his wife, an event that etched a deep and disturbing mark on his psyche. This act of violence was not only traumatic but also seemed to solidify Ramirez's desensitization to brutality. Following this incident, Ramirez's behavior took a darker turn. He began experimenting with drugs, starting with marijuana and quickly escalating to LSD and other hallucinogens. These substances provided an escape from his grim reality, but also contributed to his increasingly distorted perception of the world. During this time, Ramirez developed an obsession with Satanism, immersing himself in occult literature and rituals. He would draw pentagrams on his arms and delve into morbid fantasies, feeding a growing desire to enact his darkest thoughts. His fascination with Satanism wasn't just an aesthetic choice, it became a core part of his identity and would later manifest chillingly in his crimes. Ramirez's crime spree began in earnest in 1984, marking the onset of one of the most horrifying chapters in Los Angeles' history. His first known murder was the brutal killing of 79-year-old Jenny Vinco, who was sexually assaulted, stabbed repeatedly, and left nearly decapitated in her Los Angeles home. This gruesome act was just the beginning. Over the next year, Ramirez's attacks became more frequent, more violent, and more unpredictable. His methods involved breaking into homes in the dead of night, often through unlocked windows or doors. Once inside, he would unleash unspeakable horrors upon his victims, assaulting, torturing, and murdering them with a chilling lack of empathy. Ramirez did not follow a specific pattern with his victims. He targeted men, women, and children of all ages and backgrounds, further adding to the pervasive fear that no one was safe. His arsenal included guns, knives, machetes, hammers, and household items, anything within reach that could inflict pain and suffering. He often subjected his victims to psychological terror, forcing them to swear to Satan or chanting dark invocations, a manifestation of his deep-seated obsession with Satanism. The randomness of his attacks and the sheer brutality of his methods left both law enforcement and the public reeling, struggling to comprehend the evil that stalked their city. One of the most terrifying aspects of Ramirez's crimes was his complete disregard for a specific victim profile. His targets ranged from children as young as 6 years old to elderly couples in their 80s. He brutally assaulted both men and women, showing no mercy or hesitation. His methods were equally unpredictable and gruesome, involving guns, knives, hammers, and even household objects turned into instruments of torture. He was known to bludgeon his victims with metal objects, slit throats with chilling precision, or shoot them without warning. Survivors of his attacks reported enduring psychological terror beyond the physical violence. Ramirez often forced them to swear to Satan, made them repeat satanic phrases, or performed ritualistic gestures during his assault. His obsession with dark rituals and the occult added a profoundly unsettling layer to his already horrific crimes, amplifying the terror he left in his wake. As the body count continued to rise, the Los Angeles Police Department found themselves in a frantic race against time. The attacks spanned a vast geographical area, and the varying methods of murder only added to the confusion. Initially, investigators believed they were dealing with multiple killers. However, a crucial breakthrough came when forensic experts identified a distinct footprint left by an Avia sneaker at multiple crime scenes. This seemingly small clue was a pivotal turning point in the investigation, revealing that a single, exceptionally dangerous predator was behind the chaos. As this information reached the media, fear spread like wildfire. The press dubbed the unknown assailant the Night Stalker, a name that struck fear into the hearts of Southern Californians. The city became a landscape of locked doors, bolted windows, and sleepless nights, as residents realized the horror could strike at any moment, anywhere, and to anyone. A critical break came when Ramirez left a fingerprint on a stolen car, finally giving authorities the solid evidence needed to identify him. His mugshot was widely circulated, plastered on every news outlet and street corner, ensuring there was no escape. On August 31, 1985, while attempting to steal a car in East Los Angeles, Ramirez was recognized by locals. What followed was a chaotic and violent scene as a group of civilians chased him down. Desperate and terrified, Ramirez ran through the neighborhood, but the mob caught up to him, delivering a brutal beating. By the time the police arrived, Ramirez was bloodied and subdued, marking a dramatic and almost cinematic end to his reign of terror. Ramirez's trial began in 1989 and quickly became a media spectacle. His bizarre and unsettling behavior only added to the public fascination and horror. He would often show up to court with pentagrams drawn on his hand, flashing them to the jury while proclaiming, "Hail Satan." His demeanor was cold and detached, and at times he seemed to relish the attention, smirking at victims' families and showing no remorse. The trial, one of the longest and most expensive in California history, dragged on for over 4 years. More than 100 witnesses testified, painting a harrowing picture of Ramirez's brutality. Survivors recounted their terrifying encounters, while forensic experts detailed the overwhelming evidence linking Ramirez to the crimes. When the guilty verdict was finally delivered, Ramirez was convicted of 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. During his sentencing, he showed no sign of remorse. The judge condemned him to death, stating that Ramirez's actions reflected cruelty, callousness, and viciousness beyond any human understanding. Ramirez's chilling response to his sentence was, "Big deal. Death always comes with the territory. I'll see you in Disneyland." Ramirez spent the remainder of his life on death row at San Quentin State Prison, where he became one of the most infamous inmates in California's history. His time behind bars was marked by a bizarre and unsettling dichotomy. Despite his heinous crimes, which included a brutal spree of home invasions, assaults, and murders that terrorized Southern California in the mid-1980s, Ramirez continued to attract a cult-like following. His dark charisma and the media's portrayal of him as the embodiment of evil only seemed to fuel the fascination of certain individuals. He received a steady stream of fan mail and love letters from admirers who were drawn to his dangerous allure. Some of these fans believed they saw a misunderstood soul behind his chilling demeanor, while others were simply captivated by his notoriety. One of his most devoted admirers was Doreen Leoy, a magazine editor who believed Ramirez was innocent and led a public campaign to prove his supposed innocence. Their correspondence eventually turned into a relationship, and in 1996, Ramirez and Leoy were married in a ceremony held within the prison walls. Ramirez's health began to decline in the early 2010s. He was diagnosed with B-cell lymphoma, a form of blood cancer, which significantly weakened him. On June 7, 2013, at the age of 53, Richard Ramirez died from complications related to the disease while still awaiting execution. He had spent over 2 decades on death row, living out his final years in a maximum security environment far removed from the notoriety he once basked in. His death, though not by the execution he had been sentenced to, brought a quiet end to a story that had left a dark stain on American history. Richard Ramirez's story is a chilling reminder of how a deeply troubled individual can unleash unimaginable horror on a community. His legacy endures as a dark chapter in the annals of American crime history, serving as both a cautionary tale and a subject of morbid fascination for true crime enthusiasts.